I think I messed up. Wait, I'm sure I did. Welcome to Young Elder TV, where UFOs, religions, Anunnaki, and black youth collide in a cosmic comedy. Meet Marcus, our fearless leader. He's an aspiring scientist and part-time alien enthusiast. Then there's Maya, his sister, a no-nonsense lawyer who secretly believes in ancient astronauts. Oh, and don't forget Grandma Pearl. She swears she had tea with an alien once. And finally, their quirky neighbor, Mr. Thompson, convinced he's a reincarnated god. With 3 million fans already hooked, Young Elder TV blends laughs with galactic mysteries. Ready to join the fun? Hit that subscribe button and dive into the cosmic chaos. Young Elder TV, where the stars align for comedy. The zombie apocalypse. It's a concept that has terrified and fascinated us for decades. Movies, TV shows, and books depict gruesome scenarios of the undead rising and wreaking havoc on humanity. But what if this horrifying fantasy became our reality? What if we were forced to confront flesh-eating monsters not on a screen, but in our own backyards? While the idea of corpses returning to life might seem far-fetched, the possibility of a global pandemic, a catastrophic event that could plunge our world into chaos, is very real. The threat might not come from the undead, but the need for survival remains the same. This essay explores the terrifying possibility of a zombie apocalypse, examining its potential causes and, more importantly, outlining the survival strategies needed to withstand such an event. But this isn't just about surviving hordes of the undead. It's about being prepared for any crisis, for understanding that the skills needed to outlive a zombie outbreak are the same skills that could save your life in any disaster. Imagine waking up one day to find that the world as you know it has changed overnight. The streets are empty, stores are closed, and there's an eerie silence that hangs in the air. The news is filled with reports of strange occurrences, people acting violently, and a mysterious illness spreading rapidly. Panic sets in as the reality of the situation begins to sink in. You realize that you need to act quickly to ensure your safety and the safety of your loved ones. The first step is to gather information and stay informed about the situation. Knowledge is power, and understanding the nature of the threat is crucial. Next, you need to assess your resources. What do you have on hand that can help you survive? Food, water, medical supplies, and tools are essential. Make a list of what you have and what you need to acquire. Remember, in a crisis, the basics of survival become paramount. Once you have your supplies, it's time to think about your shelter. Where will you stay to remain safe? Your home may be the best option, but you need to ensure it's secure. Check for any vulnerabilities and make necessary repairs. If staying at home isn't an option, identify alternative locations where you can seek refuge. Communication is another critical aspect of survival. Stay in touch with family and friends and establish a plan for how you'll communicate if traditional methods fail. Walkie-talkies, satellite phones, and even handwritten notes can be invaluable in maintaining contact. In addition to physical preparations, mental and emotional readiness is equally important. The stress of a crisis can take a toll on your mental health, so it's essential to stay calm and focused. Practice mindfulness, stay connected with loved ones, and take breaks when needed to recharge. Finally, remember that survival is a community effort. Work together with your neighbors and local community to share resources and support each other. In times of crisis, unity and cooperation can make all the difference. The idea of a zombie apocalypse may seem like pure fiction, but the principles of survival are very real. By being prepared, staying informed, and working together, we can face any challenge that comes our way. So, whether it's zombies or any other disaster, remember, survival is about readiness, resilience, and resourcefulness. Stay safe, stay prepared, and stay resilient. Where would a zombie apocalypse originate? This question has fascinated and terrified humanity for decades, spawning countless theories and stories. The idea of the dead rising from their graves to walk among the living is a concept that has been explored in literature, film, and folklore. But what if it were more than just fiction? What if there were a scientific basis for such an event? How would these creatures come to be? Theories range from the plausible to the fantastical. Some suggest that a virus, much like the ones we see in nature, could mutate or be engineered to reanimate dead tissue. This virus could spread rapidly, infecting the living and turning them into mindless, flesh-eating zombies. Others propose that a parasitic organism could take control of a host's body, much like certain fungi do with insects. Theories abound, each as chilling as the last. Some scientists have even speculated about the possibility of a prion disease, similar to mad cow disease, that could cause the brain to deteriorate and lead to zombie-like behavior. The idea of a pathogen that can alter human behavior so drastically is both fascinating and terrifying. Some believe a highly contagious virus, perhaps engineered in a lab, could reanimate the dead, turning them into ravenous, flesh-eating monsters. This scenario is not as far-fetched as it might seem. Advances in genetic engineering and virology have made it possible to create viruses that can alter the behavior of their hosts. In a world where bioterrorism is a real threat, the idea of a weaponized zombie virus is not entirely out of the realm of possibility. Others speculate that an unknown cosmic event, something that disrupts the very fabric of life and death, could be the culprit. Imagine a meteor shower carrying extraterrestrial pathogens that infect the dead, reanimating them, or perhaps a cosmic radiation event that alters the fundamental properties of life itself. These ideas may sound like science fiction, but they remind us of how little we truly understand about the universe and our place in it. Imagine a world where the dead simply rise, inexplicably, driven by an insatiable hunger for living flesh. This scenario has been depicted in countless horror films and novels. But what if it were to happen in reality? The implications would be catastrophic. Society as we know it would collapse, and the living would be forced to fight for survival against an overwhelming tide of the undead. And then there's the most terrifying possibility of all. A world where every single corpse, from every cemetery and crypt across the globe, claws its way out of the earth. This would mean billions of the undead, a relentless, decaying army, hungry for the living. The sheer scale of such an event is almost unimaginable. Cities would fall, governments would collapse, and humanity would be pushed to the brink of extinction. Billions of the undead, a relentless, decaying army, hungry for the living. The thought of facing such an overwhelming force is enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. But it also serves as a reminder of the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit. In the face of such a dire threat, people would band together, using their collective knowledge and resources to find a way to survive. While these scenarios might seem like the stuff of nightmares, they serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, of the ever-present possibility of the unknown and the unpredictable. They challenge us to think about how we would respond to such a crisis and what measures we can take to prevent it. In a world where new diseases and threats are constantly emerging, it's important to remain vigilant and prepared for the unexpected. The zombie apocalypse may be a work of fiction, but the lessons it teaches us about survival, resilience, and the human spirit are very real. The fascination with zombies, with their relentless pursuit of the living, stems from a primal fear of the unknown. This fear is deeply rooted in our psyche, tapping into the most basic and ancient parts of our brain. Zombies, with their decaying flesh and insatiable hunger, are the perfect embodiment of this fear. They are relentless, unstoppable, and devoid of any humanity, making them the ultimate nightmare. The breakdown of society is another aspect that makes the zombie apocalypse so terrifying. The idea that the world as we know it could collapse, that the structures and systems we rely on could fail, is a fear that many of us share. In a world overrun by zombies, the familiar rules no longer apply. The safety and security we take for granted are stripped away, leaving us vulnerable and exposed. And ultimately, the fear of our own mortality is at the heart of the zombie mythos. Zombies are a stark reminder of our own inevitable death. They are the walking dead, a grotesque reflection of what we could become. This fear of death, of the unknown that lies beyond, is something that has haunted humanity for centuries. Zombies represent a loss of control, a world where the familiar rules no longer apply. In a zombie apocalypse, the world is turned upside down. The things we once relied on, the systems and structures that provided order and stability, are gone. We are left to fend for ourselves in a chaotic and dangerous world. They embody our deepest fears: disease, death, the collapse of civilization. The zombie apocalypse is a world where the worst-case scenario has come true. It's a world where disease runs rampant, where death is a constant presence, and where civilization has crumbled. It's a world where survival is a daily struggle, and where the future is uncertain. The zombie apocalypse, in its most terrifying form, is a world stripped bare, where survival depends on our instincts. In this world, the only thing that matters is staying alive. It's a world where the strong survive and the weak perish. It's a world where every decision, every action can mean the difference between life and death. Our resourcefulness and our willingness to fight for every last breath are put to the test. In a zombie apocalypse, we are forced to rely on our wits and our instincts. We must be resourceful, finding ways to survive in a world that is hostile and unforgiving. We must be willing to fight, to do whatever it takes to stay alive. But within this darkness, there's a flicker of hope. Even in the bleakest of circumstances, there is always a glimmer of hope. It's this hope that keeps us going, that gives us the strength to carry on. It's the hope that we can survive, that we can rebuild, that we can create a better future. The zombie apocalypse, while terrifying, also forces us to confront our own mortality. It makes us appreciate the preciousness of life and to recognize the strength and resilience of the human spirit. In the face of unimaginable horror, we find the will to survive, to rebuild and to hope for a better tomorrow, to appreciate the preciousness of life and to recognize the strength and resilience of the human spirit. In the face of unimaginable horror, we find the will to survive, to rebuild and to hope for a better tomorrow. The zombie apocalypse is a test of our humanity, a test of our ability to come together and support one another in the face of adversity. In the face of unimaginable horror, we find the will to survive, to rebuild and to hope for a better tomorrow. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. It's a reminder that we are stronger than we think, that we can overcome even the greatest of challenges. The zombie apocalypse is a metaphor for the human condition, a reminder that we are capable of great things, even in the face of great adversity. In the event of a zombie outbreak, densely populated cities would quickly transform into death traps, becoming almost impossible to navigate safely. The sheer number of people, combined with the close proximity of buildings, would create a perfect storm for the virus to spread like wildfire, infecting thousands in mere hours. Your first priority is to escape the urban jungle as swiftly as possible. Head for the outskirts, to less populated areas where the risk of encountering hordes of the undead is significantly lower. Remember, speed is key. Every minute counts in this race for survival. Choose your route carefully, avoiding main roads and highways which will likely be clogged with abandoned vehicles and panicked crowds, making them dangerous. Opt for backroads, trails and even waterways if possible, as these are less likely to be congested. Your goal is to put as much distance between yourself and the infected zones as possible, ensuring your safety.
Patient Zero, the spark. In the heart of the city, amidst the daily hustle and bustle, there was one individual who would unknowingly become the catalyst for an unprecedented catastrophe. The city was a hive, millions unaware. People went about their lives oblivious to the silent threat lurking among them. The streets were filled with laughter, conversations, and the hum of everyday life. A single bite, a whisper of contagion, changed everything. It was an ordinary day when the first bite occurred, unnoticed by the masses. The whisper of contagion spread quietly, like a shadow creeping through the city. He arrived at the hospital disoriented. His mind clouded, his body betraying him. The hospital, a place of healing, became the first battleground. Doctors saw confusion, not the harbinger of the end. They treated him as they would any other patient, unaware that they were facing the beginning of a nightmare. His name, his story, lost to the chaos that followed. The hospital descended into pandemonium as more and more patients began to exhibit the same symptoms. The identity of patient Zero was swallowed by the ensuing chaos. The virus, swift and merciless, ripped through him. It was relentless, attacking his body with a ferocity that left no room for hope. Under the microscope, the virus was a monstrous entity, multiplying at an alarming rate. His cells mutated, his humanity extinguished. The transformation was horrifying, a grotesque dance of cells turning against their host. His humanity was stripped away, leaving behind a shell of what once was. The first doctor fell, then another. The medical staff, once the city's protectors, became its first victims. One by one, they succumbed to the virus, their fall marking the spread of the plague. The infected, driven by an insatiable hunger, spread the plague ward by ward. Panic ensued as the infected turned on the uninfected, their hunger insatiable, their humanity lost. The hospital, once a sanctuary, became a place of terror and despair. The city, once vibrant and alive, fell silent. Streets that were once bustling with life were now deserted. Abandoned cars and empty buildings stood as silent witnesses to the devastation. News of the outbreak spread like wildfire. Emergency broadcasts interrupted regular programming, and phones buzzed with alerts. The world watched in horror as the city fell into chaos. Scientists worked tirelessly to find a cure. In labs around the world, the brightest minds raced against time, their efforts a beacon of hope in the darkness. Quarantine measures were enforced, families were separated, and emotional goodbyes became a common sight. The human cost of the outbreak was immeasurable. Memorials for the victims began to appear. Candles and flowers marked the places where lives were lost, and people gathered to mourn and remember. But even in the darkest times, there was a glimmer of hope. As the sun rose over the city, it brought with it the promise of a new day, a chance to rebuild and recover. Week 1. Whispers in the ER. News trickled out slowly. Strange attacks in hospitals, quarantine protocols, whispers of something bad. The infected, still resembling humans, blended in. Their bites, necrotic and vicious, told a different story. First responders on the front lines faced the unknown. Bites became infections. Infections became monsters. The Walking Dead, a nightmare sprung to life, overwhelmed hospitals and police stations. The city, a breeding ground for horror. Week 2. Quarantine and chaos. The government, slow to react, finally took action. Quarantine zones, hastily erected, couldn't hold back the tide. The infected multiplied exponentially. Cities became death traps. Panic spread faster than the virus. Food and supplies dwindled. The fabric of society, already strained, began to tear. Neighbors turned on neighbors, desperate for safety, for survival. Week 3. The walls come down. The quarantine failed. The infected, relentless and ever-growing, breached the barriers. Cities descended into chaos. The Walking Dead swarmed the streets, drawn by the scent of living flesh. The living fled, seeking refuge in the countryside. Families shattered, torn apart by the relentless horde. The world, as they knew it, was gone, replaced by a primal struggle for survival. Section 5, Month 1, under martial law. Military intervention, a last-ditch effort, proved futile. Soldiers, ill-prepared for the relentless enemy, fell by the thousands. Cities, now overrun, were deemed lost causes. The remnants of the government retreated. Survivors, scattered and desperate, formed fragile alliances. Trust became a luxury they could ill afford. The world, once filled with the promise of tomorrow, now offered only the stark reality of survival. Section 6, Month 2, The Fall. The collapse was swift and brutal. Communication networks fell silent. Power grids went dark. The infrastructure of civilization crumbled, leaving behind a world of silence and shadows. The rule of law, once a pillar of society, dissolved into anarchy. The strong preyed on the weak. Survival became a game of cunning, brutality, and sheer luck. Section 7, Year 1, Survival of the Fittest. 1 year into the apocalypse, the world belonged to the dead. The living, hardened by loss and driven by necessity, adapted. They scavenged for scraps, fought for shelter, and clung to life with grim determination. The once familiar world had become a treacherous landscape. The dead, though decaying, were relentless. The living, forever haunted by loss, were forced to confront their own mortality with every passing day. Section 8, Year 5, Echoes of What Was. 5 years of living hell had reshaped humanity. The once bustling cities, now silent and desolate, stood as haunting reminders of what was lost. The air, thick with the scent of decay, carried the memories of a world that had crumbled under the weight of its own hubris. Gone were the comforts of the old world. The laughter of children in playgrounds, the hum of conversations in crowded malls, and the warmth of a cozy living room were now distant echoes. The remnants of these places, now overrun by nature and time, told stories of lives abruptly interrupted. Survival instincts, honed by constant danger, became second nature. Every day was a battle, not just against the undead, but against the very elements. People learned to make fire from the simplest of tools, to scavenge for food in the most unlikely places, and to move silently, always aware of the lurking threats. The wilderness, once a place of leisure, had become a battleground for survival. The whispers of the past, of a world before the fall, echoed faintly. Old family photos, now covered in dust and debris, served as painful reminders of loved ones lost. Each photograph, each personal item left behind, was a fragment of a story, a piece of a puzzle that would never be complete. The memories of birthdays, holidays, and simple everyday moments were now treasures of a bygone era. Small pockets of survivors emerged, rebuilding in the wasteland. These groups, bound by the shared experience of loss and survival, found strength in unity. They built makeshift shelters from the ruins, creating small havens of hope amidst the desolation. Communities formed not out of convenience, but out of necessity, as people realized that their best chance of survival lay in working together. They clung to the hope of a better future, even as the dead lurked at their doorsteps, a constant reminder of the fragility of their existence. Nights were the hardest, filled with the eerie silence of anticipation and the occasional distant groan of the undead. Guards stood vigilant, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Every creak, every rustle was a potential threat. Yet amidst the fear there was a glimmer of hope, a belief that one day the world could be rebuilt, and the echoes of what was could give way to the promise of what could be. Section 9, Year 10, A New Dawn. A decade after the outbreak, a semblance of order began to emerge. Survivors, hardened by years of struggle, established settlements. They learned to farm, to build, to defend themselves against the relentless undead. The world remained a dangerous place. The infected, though dwindling in number, still posed a threat. But in the hearts of the living, a spark of hope flickered. They had endured the apocalypse. They had survived. Section 10. A spark of hope, a legacy of loss. The zombie apocalypse had reshaped the world, leaving an indelible scar on humanity. The once bustling cities, filled with life and energy, now stood silent and desolate. The streets that were once filled with the sounds of laughter and daily hustle were now eerily quiet, echoing only the whispers of the past. Millions had perished. Cities lay in ruins. The infrastructure that once supported civilization had crumbled, leaving behind a haunting reminder of what once was. The world had changed in ways that were unimaginable, and the survivors were left to navigate this new, harsh reality. But from the ashes of the old world, a new society was emerging. The survivors, forever marked by loss, carried with them the memory of the fallen. Each step they took was a tribute to those who had been lost, a promise to never forget. They scavenged for supplies, rebuilt shelters, and formed new communities, driven by the hope of a better future. They knew that the fight for survival was far from over, but they also knew that humanity was resilient. The bonds formed in the face of adversity were stronger than any force that sought to tear them apart. They worked together, sharing resources and knowledge, building a new world from the remnants of the old. They would rebuild. They would endure. The human spirit, they had learned, was harder to kill than any virus. In the midst of destruction, they found moments of joy and hope. Children played among the ruins, their laughter a beacon of light in the darkness. Communities came together to celebrate small victories, each one a step towards a brighter future. The legacy of loss was a heavy burden, but it was also a source of strength. It reminded them of what they had overcome and what they were capable of achieving. The spark of hope that had ignited in the darkest of times continued to burn, guiding them forward. They were not just survivors, they were the architects of a new dawn, determined to build a world where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The journey was long and fraught with challenges, but with each passing day, they grew stronger, more united, and more hopeful. The apocalypse had taken much from them, but it had also given them a profound understanding of what it meant to be human. And in that understanding, they found the courage to keep moving forward, to keep fighting, and to keep hoping.